Hello. Typically, this lecture would be in person, but it's not. So here we are. Um, as part of any design technology process, there's math involved. I know that you're whining or complaining about this right now, so get over it. Math is here to stay. Here's what we're going to do. Specifically in the context of what we're going to be doing, we're going to be talking about fractions. More specifically, we're going to be talking about tape measures. The metric system, which is centimeters, meters, kilometers, makes sense. It's nice and ordered. It's all based on 10. So 10 millimeters equals 1 centimeter, 100 centimeters equals 1 meter, 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer. That's really great. However, that's not the system we use here in the United States. We don't use the metric system. We use the imperial system. Inches, feet, miles. So we have to have a way to accurately talk about that. The smallest unit you'll find on an imperial tape measure is 1/16 of an inch. So we're going to start there. We're going to start by talking about inches. In addition to that, what we're going to be also looking at is how inches stack into larger things, just briefly. And then you're going to have a couple worksheets, and the first one is going to be specifically an exercise in seeing how fractions work together. And by what I mean by fractions work together is how a whole is divided up. There'll be some questions about that. There's a specific format you have to answer in because of the way I have the worksheet set up. And the way the worksheet is set up is it automatically grades. And by virtue of it automatically grading, you don't have to wait for me. You can do it as many times as you'd like, but that's where we're going to start. The other one is an actual measuring worksheet. It's a ruler, and there are going to be certain chunks that are delineated out, and I'm going to ask you to find out how large those are. So, without further ado, we're going to look at the inch. Excuse my how I sound. Okay. This is 1 inch blown way up. There's 1, there's 0. So the inconvenient thing about the real world is that things don't always end up being exactly on the inch mark. So I talked about one other thing. So when I write inches, it's 1 inch. The quotation marks, as you will, the quotation marks signify 1 inch. If this was 1 foot, it would look like this. And let's see if this works, because there's probably someone in the room with you. If I say, how many inches are in a foot? This is where you guess. So you would say things. See, it's just as awkward as when I'm in the classroom. Okay, 1 foot equals 12 inches. So 1 foot, which is about yay big, I don't have a ruler right in front of me, that's 12 inches. And when we cut stuff, it doesn't always fall on that. So 1 foot equals 12 inches. 1 inch is represented like this. 1 foot is the apostrophe mark next to it. This is going to be important when we start using the CAD program SketchUp, because you're going to need to identify if you're using inches or feet or both. So 1 inch. Obviously, this is really blown up just so you can see it on the whiteboard. So what we're going to do is, I like calling this chunkatization, and we're going to chunkatize this inch. So if something needs to be cut in between one or 2 or 3 inches, we have a way to talk about that. So we're going to, and as I said, the smallest unit is 1/16 of an inch. So that's 16 even divisions. But we're going to start with our first division. So halfway. So if we cut this into 2 pieces, we have 0, we have 1, and halfway is going to be 1/2. Pretty easy. And this is always dividing things into even pieces. And we can talk about those pieces as really tiny or we can talk about them as really large. So 1/2 inch. Now, if we go back and divide this again, right here, we now have 4 pieces. So if you look right here, this should be a review, but if like a lot of people feel they're not good at fractions, that's okay. Not being good at fractions is fine, but not wanting to get better isn't. I know that a lot of people have mental blocks about this, so it's okay. It really is. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't worry about it. But this is going to be the start of you getting better at it and being able to see how that actually works out in the shop when we get there for our woodworking unit. So 1/2 inch. So what do you think? So we had 2 big pieces. Now we've got 4. So 0, 1/4, 2/4. So that's 2/4. Or, well, I'll make my 2 look a little bit better. We'll try that again. 2/4. So whenever we write something, so it's always going to be how many pieces I have over how many parts in the whole. So 1/4 is 1 piece of the 4 pieces in the whole. So 2/4, so this would be, this is where you say something. Pausing for dramatic effect. And yes, some of you were right. Some of you probably said something else. But 3/4, yay. And then our whole. So if you think about like having all of these pieces, but they're not into one, 4 out of 4. 4 parts of a whole that is divided up into 4 parts. So that's the whole piece. Okay, next division. So we put 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So if we count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So that's 8 even divisions. So that's eighths. So 1/8. 2/8. You might be able to hear my dog whining in the background. He wants to be on camera. And when we're done, I'll probably bring him in. Okay. 2/8. 3/8. 1/2 is also 4, is the same as 4/8. So if you look at this, we've got half the total chunks. 5/8. 6/8. And if you look, this is double, this is double. So we have twice the number of parts, twice the number of pieces. 7/8. And then we have 8/8. So next thing, one last division. So we're going to divide these all up again in half. And you should be able to see this. So there we go. So 1/8, 1/2 of 1/8. So think about this. If we have 8/8, if we divide that again, we'd have 16ths. So our whole would be 16 parts. When we're at 1, 16 out of 16, 16 16ths. So right here, 1/16. Then we add another 16th, another 16, 2 16ths, 3 16ths, 4 16ths, 5 16ths. If you notice right here, those are individual 16ths. They're not sharing any of these other divisions. But the ones that we're able to reduce, and we'll talk about this in a second, or not reduce, convert to simplest terms. We'll get into that in a moment, but I just want you to be thinking about 3/8, 6 16ths, 7 16ths, 8 16ths, so same thing, 1/2 inch, 2/4, 4/8, 8 16ths. So you go 1, 2, 4, 8. It's just the number of parts. Don't freak out. 9 16ths, 10 16ths, 11 16ths, 12 16ths. I almost jumped there. I almost said 13 16ths too early. 13 16ths, 14 16ths, again, 7 times 2, You have twice the number of parts. You can do this the other way. If I give you something like this, 14/16, and I would ask you to reduce it into its, turn it into lowest terms, or, simplest terms. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. But anyway, it's okay for right now. I have a cold, obviously, and that's, yeah. Anyway, I'm going to blame that on that. All right, 14/16, 15/16, and then we have back to where we started, 16/16. So if you look at all of this, if you feel like fractions aren't your thing, draw this out. Do this. Have this with you. Having a tool to get better at something is not bad. You need to find what works for you. And let me tell you what, if you keep using this, eventually you're not going to need it anymore. It's going to transition up here. It's okay to need to work on stuff. It's okay. You're going to find that there are things like, for me, spelling. I still have, this is my office, I have at least one dictionary that's close by. Yes, that's a thing. It's a book. But the thing is that is how I make sure that if I'm writing something out longhand, I don't spell something. I can't spell necessary. It's okay. All right, so the next thing you need to know. So write this out for your worksheet. It's going to help you. Okay? Next thing you need to know. I'm checking the time. So we're at 11 minutes and 51 seconds so far. Cool. So the next thing you need to know. You're going to be asked how many chunks or how many pieces are in certain things. So if I have 8/16 here and I want to know how many quarters there are in 8/16, right there are 2 quarters. On the worksheet, that's how it's going to ask you. What you want to make sure that you do is read the question and read what it's asking for. So it's saying, how many quarters are there? It's not saying how to represent it properly. So if it's asking for, let's see, I think the first one on the worksheet, I think it has something to do with how many 16ths are in like 1.5. So let's do that together. So question is 16ths in 1 1/2. Okay? So that's the question. So, how many 16ths are in 1? So right here, we can answer that. Look right here. There are 16 in 1. So we know that. So we had 16. So how many 16ths are in 1/2? Oh, right here, we have 1/2. We look down here, 8/16. So we know that there are 8 in 1. I think this is the first one on your worksheet. So we know that there are 24/16. It's just asking you for the number of 16ths. Not writing it 24/16. If it was asking you to convert that into an improper fraction, which is when you have a numerator that is bigger than a denominator. So see this? And for those of you who may not remember, let me just erase this real quick. Okay? The numerator, so the way you set up a fraction, I know I write them a little bit different sometimes. So we have the numerator, I'm just going to write NUM, the denominator, which is right here, okay? Or I'll write them in the slash, okay? Something like that. So numerator, denominator, if this is larger than this, so if we have, like we just talked about, 24/16, that means that this is what we would call an improper fraction. Because this, as we showed before, is 1 1/2. This is what we'd call a mixed number. As I said, on the worksheet, you need to read what it's actually asking. If it's asking for you to write it in as an improper fraction, do that. If it's asking you to reduce it into lowest terms, which would be, if I have 8/16, I go to a 1/2 inch. If it's asking you to write it as a mixed number, write it as a mixed number. Or if it's asking you to go one way or the other, read what the question is. Ask someone. Okay? So the next thing, I'm going to erase this because this is how you have to report this stuff. This is a Google form. It doesn't care how close you are. I'm not asking you to put anything weird or crazy in here. The way it's set up is that you will have to answer in a specific format for it to return the answer correctly. If you don't answer in the correct format, it's going to kick it back wrong. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. So I'm going to erase this. As I said, if you need something to help you along the way, make this back up. You can pause the video. I think there's probably a second in there that's clear enough. So your answers, you're either going to have just a number. That's the first thing. If it's just a number like we talked about, my dog wanted to come in. Good boy. We'll introduce you in a second. I'm working. Okay. So I have an audience now. You'll see him in a little bit, I promise. So the way you're going to report this stuff out, first you might have a number. Like I said, 24 should be the answer to the first one. So read what it's asking you. Are you laying on my microphone cable? Yeah, you are. Great. Don't unplug that. So first things first. So you might have a whole number, or just a normal number. So 24. That's the answer to the first one. Okay. If you have a mixed number, there are 3 ways to write it. 1 dash 1.5. This is just the format. This isn't the answer to all of them. Don't get that confused. 1.5. You can also write it 1/2. The reason, also, if you look at the worksheet, you'll see stuff that looks like this. The reason I want to make it look more. The reason I put that is the font is deceiving. This means 1. The dash does not mean subtract. Again, the dash does not mean subtract. It's 1 and 1.5. I put it in that way so it would look really obvious. I didn't want you guys getting confused. Okay, so 1 and 1/2. So you can do 1/2, or 1 space, and I'm writing space in here, 1/2. The answer, or if you just have a straight up fraction of like 11/16, those are the ways you have to do that. The form isn't using some type of AI or algorithm. It's just whether or not it matches. If you put a space before or after, it'll return a wrong answer. It's just looking to match your answer. That's all it's doing. Okay? If it's confusing and you get stuff wrong, I can take a look at it and tell you to either change your format, or I might just give you the credit on it. We just need to have that conversation if you feel like you got it right and it was confusing. So, next thing. There it is. Hopefully this video is not too sketchy. I don't have the best webcam set up. So, next thing we're going to do is the measuring exercise. That measuring exercise, we have a ruler. And on that ruler, I'm just going to do this really blown up. So this is like 1, this is 2. Actually, I'm going to do this slightly different. Okay. We're going to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Something like that. I'm not trying to be super specific. I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of what it looks like. So first off, you'll find lines like this. These are called extension lines. This is called the dimension line. You'll see A. Then the first blank will say A. Guess what? You're supposed to figure out what this is. So it needs to be written in lowest terms. Okay? What? Sorry. Okay, so it needs to be written in lowest terms. And by that, this is like, let's say this is like 10/16, it needs to be written as 5/8. Okay, lowest terms. That will get you the correct answer. Now, the next thing is you'll have a couple different things here. So you'll have ones that start at 0. You can either count the spaces and start at 0, so 1, 2, 3, or you can count the lines and start at 1. So the first line would be 1, 2, 3. Okay? So this is 0 right here. And let me blow this up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay? So let's do this. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we do this, 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. See that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. So this would be 1 right here. So if I want to, so just ignore what I said before, and so you can see this a little better. So if I'm doing this right here, okay, so if I count the spaces in between, 1, and I want to go to here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4/16. Not done yet. The other way is if I start here, I start at 0 here. I count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to start at 0 or I have to start at 1. Okay? Spaces start at 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lines start at 0. Your first one is 0, so you have nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4. You still get 4/16. Now, 4/16 in lowest terms, you're not helping. Yes, you're adorable. I know they can't see you. It's okay. 4/16, okay, 1/4. Make sense? Now, sometimes it'll ask you in between here. So instead of being 0 down here, it's not starting at 0 and counting to here and then to here. I have an extension line starting here, an extension. This then becomes the de facto 0, and we count 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the same. Now, let's say I have, well, let's see, what's a good example here? Let's say I have, let's extend a little bit. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and this will go on. So let's say I'm going from here all the way to here. So I'm starting at 0. I go past 1. That's easy. So I've got 1, and I've got 1, 2, 3. 1 3/16. That's my answer right there. You don't need to, in either one of the forms, put the units. So 1 3/16. If this is my dimension line right here, and these are my extension lines. Last thing you need to know about this, and some of these will start. They're not always going to start at 0. So if it starts after 1, this then becomes our start point of 0. And you count that way. Or if it's 2 or 3. That's where some people get tripped up. You'll have one other weird instance here. So we'll erase this. There's one where there's like an extension line here and here, which is a little bit longer. I think this is like J. It's way on the right-hand side. And then you'll have another one which is like this. And there's an arrow that points in. You are measuring in between those two extension lines that the arrow is pointing towards. The reason that we do that is because a lot of times you will not have enough room to put your dimension in here. Like we write A right there, we normally will put our dimension in between there. Because we don't have the room, we can't do that. So what we would do is we'd put an arrow pointing at the extension lines so that you can then tell that's where it goes. So that's pretty much everything. You're going to have some time now to work on this, and we'll talk about a due date when I'm back in class. So, Darby, come on, buddy. Oh. Oops. So this is my dog. His name's Darby. He looks thrilled. Okay. Good boy. All right. So everyone, have a great rest of the class, and thank you for paying attention to this. I know it's not the most fun way to do things. Bye.